it would be great just to start, just tell us your full name, the day you were born, and anything you remember about that day, or anything you know about that day.
Well, my name is Iris Lillian Stas, which was Nee Gould. I was born on the 27th of March 1932, and I was born on Easter Sunday, and I always assumed that I came in an Easter egg. But that was that, you know. But that's all I can remember about my birth.
Of course. And does your name have a special meaning, or do you know anything about why your parents
Not as far as I know, because I don't think Mum and Dad, I don't know why they picked Iris. I know why they picked Lillian, because my mum's name was Lillian. But Iris, I don't know. All I know is that Iris is the swift-footed messenger of the gods.
Very good. And what were your parents like? What were your memories of your parents growing up?
Lovely. They weren't my parents, they were my friends. And I was the only child. So consequently, I did everything with them. And I loved them to bits.
Is there anything in particular, any special memories that come to mind when you think about them?
Well, Dad always used to take me everywhere, like to the park and to the swings and all that business. Mum was at home cooking the beautiful dinners, but they were both very good. And Dad always, he didn't have a very high wage, but he always tried to take us on holidays somewhere. Yeah, and I had a very happy childhood, and even though it was during the war.
And tell us about where you grew up.
Well, my mum and Dad came from the East End of London, but they came over to Blackheath to live. And then she fell for me. They were going to be married 5 years before they had me. And it was more like 5 minutes because I was born 9 months and 3 weeks after they were married, which was quite a shock to them, I believe. But anyway, but I don't know why, but Mum went over to the East End to have me. And I was born in hospital in Stepney, and consequently I was a Cockney. And then as soon as she brought me home, we came home to Blackheath again. And we lived in a very high-rise house. It was a very old house, 4 stories it was. And we lived in the attic rooms, which was only a couple of rooms. And Mum used to do her cooking on the landing. Right. So, you know, she had a really hard life. But we was always quite happy, and she always fed us well and that, you know. And all those stairs we used to have to go up and down, you know. And poor Mum, unbeknownst to us, years later we found she had a heart defect. Right. But she was up and down those stairs and the hill and God knows what, you know. Okay. But yes, they were lovely, my mum and dad.
And what was your dad doing? What was his work?
He was a lighterman on the river. Yes, he did a 7 years apprenticeship, and he was apprenticed to his father, and then he became a freeman of the river.
And what does a lighterman do for those of us who don't know?
He was towing barges.
Okay.
He was on a tug, and they were towing barges, which turned out to be quite daunting at times. Yeah.
And where did you go to school?
I went to the infant school. I went to Halestow Road. I went there when I was 5. And then when I took my 11 plus, I went to the Central School. It was comprehensive school. And I went to several schools actually, because we had to be moved because of the war years. I mean, the war broke out when I was 7 years old. And we were in this house, this very high attic rooms, you know. And then as soon as war broke out, there became a house available for renting because the people, they were getting out of London. So Dad took the opportunity and we got a house. And that was quite good. But several times we were bombed out, had our windows blown out and God knows what, you know. So, as I say, my dad would really have liked a little Jimmy, but they wouldn't go in for children when the war was on. And by the time it was finished, you know, there was quite a few years in between.
Mm. And did you enjoy your schooling?
Yes, I did. I did enjoy my school years. Mostly running around in the playground with the boys, but I wasn't very good at learning, really. They said I talked too much.
And did you have a group of friends? Are there any names?
Oh yes,
that
I
you
had a
can
group
remember?
of friends, but I did have my special friend. I met her when I was at school, and we were friends right up until she died, and that was Barbara. And she used to live in the nurses' home belonging to the big hospital in Blackheath. Well, no, the hospital was actually in Greenwich, and her dad used to do caretaking and that down there. He was in the morgue sometimes as well, which I wasn't very very keen on. Mm. But no, we used to have quite an imagination, you know. I always remember one of the games we used to play. We used to play as though we were swimming in lagoons under the bed.
That is an imagination. And did you have any idea of what it was that you wanted to do when you left school or grew up? You know, was there any sort of ambition that you had that you wanted to realise?
First of all, I wanted to be a policewoman. Well, my size then, they didn't take on. And then I said to my dad, I think I'd like to be a wren. And he said, oh no. He says, I've been in the Navy. No. In the end, I wound up as a shorthand typist at the old gas company, South Eastern Gas Company it was then, and then they nationalised it. So, but I was there all my working time until I left to have Kevin.
Mm. And kind of going back to those war years, do you have any kind of particular memories, any stories that spring to mind when you think about that time?
Well, yeah. There's in the school time, we were always ducking and diving, and then they closed the school for a while. So there was a lady who lived along by us, and she used to have about 5 of us all taking lessons in her house. That was quite nice. And then I know that when the siren used to go, we had a dog, Judy. She was lovely. And about 15 minutes before the siren used to go, her ears would prick up. So we all used to get all our things together and go down to the Anderson shelter. And my grandmother was living with us at the time because my grandfather wouldn't have a shelter at his place. So she came and lived with us. Mm. And the first things that she used to grab when the siren went was her hat and her insurance policies.
Very sensible. And can you remember any times growing up as a child or a teenager where you got in trouble or you were told off by your parents for anything?
No, I didn't used to get into an awful lot. The only thing is that my friend and I, her father, the other friend that I had, she was only small. Her father was a dentist, and he was, in our eyes, he was quite wealthy. And sometimes she used to pinch a cigarette. And one day we got caught smoking, and I got clipped round the ear from her grandmother because she said I was encouraging her Pauline, which I wasn't. It was the other way around. But I did first start smoking when I was about 7, and I used to roll up brown paper.
With nothing in it.
Very appetising.
And thinking about your parents, what would you say was one of the most important things that they taught you growing up, or the values that they instilled in you?
Always to be polite, and always treat other people like you wanted to be treated yourself. And I just sort of liked other people.
And did you see them doing that, or?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, we used to live up on quite a high hill, and my dad used to go to work on a bicycle, and he used to bring shopping up and that, and very often he'd be carrying some lady's bag up on his bike he was always like that. He was always a gentleman, always helped other ladies out, you know, to carry things and that. So he was very, very good. Yeah.
And then when did you leave school? How old were you when you left?
15.
Okay, and what did you do after that?
I went to the gas company. I started off
Yeah.
at the gas company, and then I became the boss's secretary there. Much by fluke, because I was supposed to do shorthand, but I used to do the Iris Gould shorthand.
You got away with it.
I got away with it.
And when did you meet Grandad?
When I was 13 and he was 14.
And how did that happen?
It was at the VE street party after the war on the 8th of May. And the first time he ever saw me was I was standing up on a make-do stage with a band playing behind me, and I was singing My Old Man Said Follow the Van. And I had a feather boa around my neck. I had a bird cage in one hand, and in the other hand I had an empty gin bottle. That's the first.
He fell for you.
He did.
And what did you think of him when you first met him?
Didn't make him. You know, he was all right.
And tell us a bit more about your singing, because I know that you used to do a bit of singing.
Oh, I did, yeah. I did pass get through some competitions and that, you know, and I really would have liked to have done that. But there was a man that used to know my dad, and he said, you know, you ought to try and do something about her voice and that. So Dad said, no. He said, I don't know what she's got in tail with that kind of career. And he put his foot down, really. And in a way, I'm really glad, because what I really wanted to do when I left work, when I was old enough, you know, to know, is I just wanted to leave and have children. Get married and have children. And that's what I've done, and that's what I'm satisfied with. Yeah.
So you knew Grandad from your teenage years. How long was it until you started kind of properly courting, and then how long was it until you were engaged?
I suppose he wanted to get engaged before he had to do his national service at 17. No, 18. And we were just going about. We used to go about in a group of lads and the girls, you know. So that's how we used to really go about. But then when we started going about seriously, he said he would like to get engaged before he went away. And I said no, because I said, I like going out dancing and things like that. I don't want to have a guilty conscience. I said, but I'll wait. And then, because when he got in the army and his friends got talking to him, oh, you'll be getting a Dear John letter at some time, you know, she won't last and all that business. But, and because he was in the army for 6 months training, and then he went, he was shipped out to Malaya, and he was sent out there for a year. And then just as he was packing up to come home, they put another 6 months on. So he was out there for 18 months. But when he came home, I'll never forget that day. I was at work and somebody rang to say, Philip's come home, he's home, come down, you know, to his house. And I went tearing down there, knocked on the door, and blow me, he was cleaning his teeth when I arrived. So I got rather a minty kiss.
And then he proposed to you shortly after that?
Yeah, I don't ever remember. He didn't go down on his knee or anything, you know. It just seemed to, we assumed that we would get engaged. And we got engaged when he came home, and then we were engaged for a year and 10 months, and then we got married. And when he first came home, my dad hired a converted invasion craft to go on the River Thames with. Right. And that's when he did propose to me. Said, shall we get engaged, you know, which we did. Yeah.
And what do you remember about your wedding day? Where and when was it? And do you have any sort of specific
Oh,
memories
yes.
of it?
I mean, my wedding day was Coronation Week. And all the bunting was out, you know, and which was very exciting. And we had a really good turnout for that. And it was a lovely day. Mind you, the coronation, it was raining. And I thought, oh, if it's like that for her, what's it going to be like for me? And it was a beautiful day.
And where was it that you were married?
In Greenwich, at Christ Church in Greenwich. That's where, I keep saying Dad, but it's not, it was your granddad, wasn't it? Lived in Greenwich.
Yeah. And what were those early years of marriage like? Where did you live after you were married?
Oh, we had 2 rooms over at New Cross Gate. It wasn't easy. As I say, we only had 2 rooms, and we used to have to share the bathroom and go down some stairs, and it was a bit chilly, cold. I always remember one time it was a thick fog, and I used to work on the Old Kent Road, which was near to where I lived. And Maureen, Grandad's sister, she used to work along there too. And I think I was expecting then, and she got as far as our place and couldn't get any further. You couldn't see a hand in front of your face. So she managed to find her way into our place. So she came up to us, and we tried to get a message to her. There was no phones in those days, that was the trouble, but I think her neighbour had one. So anyway, she said, will it be all right if I stay here? Well, we only had the double bed. So Dad said, well, I'll go onto the cushions from the little settee. Well, our little settee was only a cottage suite, and there were 3 little cushions. So he put them on the floor, and every time he moved, his bottom touched the lino on the floor. It wasn't very comfortable, and the draft was blowing under the door. So in the end, he just said, it's no good, I can't stand this, shift over. So there were the 3 of us in bed.
And Grandad was working as well at that
Oh,
point.
yes,
And
yeah.
where was he working?
Oh, he was working up. He always worked up at the head office in London, at the bank,
Yep.
Lombard Street, and he was always up there. So yeah, he's
Was he working long days? Was he home in the
well.
evening?
He was at home. He used to go out at about. I suppose he used to go out about 8 in the morning then, and then came home in the evening. But sort of around about 6 or 7 in the evening. But yeah, they were quite long days.
And what did you like to do together before you had children in those kind of early years? What was it that you liked to
We
do?
used to go everywhere together, and we never used to go out on our own. That was one thing, we was always together. We liked mixing with our friends and go to the cinema and things like that. Yeah.
And what made you leave London?
Well, cost, I suppose, really, because Grandad was entitled to a reduced mortgage working for the bank. And we looked for places to buy, and we found that they were very expensive in London. And then we looked all around Haywards Heath as well, but they were too expensive. So in the end, Grandad's cousin, Joan, she got in touch with us and said they were building houses in Crawley. And he had to make sure that he was near a station to get to work, which was ideal because Three Bridges Station was on our doorstep, more or less. And so anyway, we decided to come down and have a look round here, and they were quite nice places. The only thing is that Grandad was very adamant on where he lived. And he said to me, one word, we are not going to have a shared drive. Because they were semi-detached houses. So I was dying to get out those 2 rooms, you know. So I said to him, well, I think I'd take anything really. Anyway, we went to the sales office and we were sitting there talking, and that's when he said, I don't want a shared drive. So she said, we've sold out all of those, you know, very sorry. So Dad said, right, come on, off we go. We got to the door, and as we did, the lady said to her, oh, excuse me a minute, we've just had a cancellation. And that's how we managed to get our semi-detached house on the end. And I'm glad we did, because you see, I had Kevin and he was 10 months old when I left those 2 rooms. It was hard going. So that was quite a relief. We're very lucky, really.
And how has Crawley changed since you moved there?
Don't ask me. It's nothing like. I mean, it's a shame, because it was quite a nice place. There were a whole load of fields and things like that, but I don't like it anymore. No.
You're happy here
So
now?
I'm glad we managed to get out there. But I mean, we were there for 12 years in our semi-detached house, and I had Trevor and I had Derek there. They were both born in that house, whereas Kevin was born in a hospital. And then after 12 years, unfortunately, while my mum was staying with me, she had a stroke, and she was only 48. So we said, now what we're going to do about this? So my dad was distraught. He was absolutely distraught about it, and he didn't want to put her into a home or anything like that. So he'll never forget my feel for it, because he said, well, there's only one thing she can do, Dad. She'll have to come down and live with us, which she did. And I was only 4 months pregnant with Trevor when all this happened. So it was a bit of a hard time.
So she moved in with you,
Yeah.
and your dad stayed.
He had to stay in
Living,
London
yeah.
because he used to work with the tides, you see, on the river,
Yeah.
and he used to come down on his days off.
So how did life change when you first had Kevin, my dad? How was that?
Well, that's a good question to answer. Kevin was born, and we was over the moon, because in those days you didn't know what you were having. I mean, if we'd have known, he might have gone back. No, he was really lovely. He's one of those cuddly ones, you know. And as I say, we didn't know what we were having. We had a little boy, and we were very, very pleased. And before you say anything about their names, don't mention them, because we like them. What doesn't matter what they say, we like their names.
Well, how did you choose their names?
Well, I think I can still see Philip writing their signatures and saying, "Oh yeah, that goes with that. That goes with Stas." You know, they're a good combination. And then we chose Mark, Kevin Mark, and then because when the others came along, we just thought, oh, middle name beginning with M, you know. But we just like their names, and I don't care what they say.
And family life in those early years must have been really hard with Grandad going up to London.
It was, and we didn't have any transport. The only transport I had was a bike, and I used to have to walk all the way up. You won't know it, I don't suppose, but Pound Hill. Can you remember Pound Hill? It's quite a long walk up there, and you used to have to go up and get all the shopping up there. And then when my dad used to come down sometimes, when he was old enough, I used to put Kevin on the back of the bike on a little seat, and I used to come back with two great big shopping bags full of shopping on the handlebars. Now, if you was to see anybody do that now, you'd have a fit. But that's the way we used to go on. And we didn't get a car until Derek was 5.
And what was Grandad like as a father to those young boys?
Oh, he was lovely. He used to sit and read to them. He taught them to read. They all read before they went to school, so, you know, that sort of thing. He was no sportsman. He didn't like football and things like that very much. And so they had to find their own amusement in that sort of thing. But we used to go on loads of walks, and he always used to take us on holiday and that sort of thing, you know. Yeah, he was lovely.
Yeah. And that sort of going on holidays and enjoying family life that your parents obviously liked doing, and then you liked doing as a family.
Yeah, well, my dad used to take me. We always used to go to, well, for 8 years running, we used to go to Blackpool. And Dad used to go on all the swings and roundabouts and slides and that, and there'd be poor Mum holding the coats, you know, while we were gone. But we met some lovely friends while we were at Blackpool, and we were lifelong friends with them afterwards. It was very good. We thoroughly enjoyed everything.
And where else did you enjoy travelling to as a family of 5?
We did go a couple of times abroad when they were young and that, you know. But I think the first place we went to was the Isle of Wight. We thought we had to have a, you know, sort of passport for there. But
And you used to go to the New Forest a lot as
oh,
well.
yes, we camped. We loved to camp in the New Forest. And then because we used to go with Mozzie and John when we used to go to the camping. It was great, yeah.
And you know, 3 young boys growing up and being teenagers, there must be some good stories from that time as well.
I think they were a bit devious. They never caused us any trouble. I'll give them that, you know. Well, not that I knew of anyway. But no, they were good to us. And I always remember when I was expecting Trevor, and Kevin wanted to know what Mummy had in her tummy. And I used to say to her, "That's Fiona." Because I thought I was going to have a girl because I sort of carried a different way. So anyway, that was that. And then Fiona was born at home. And when Kevin came into the room, I said, "I've got something round here for you." I said, "Come and see." And because his eyes nearly popped out of his head, and he went, "Oh, Fiona!" Yeah, but you see, in those days, we didn't know what we were having. There was no scans and things like that. So when Derek came along and they said, "It's a boy," I said, "Oh my goodness, all those shirts." That was the first thing I said.
And then obviously, you know, a big moment for you and for our whole family has been when Derek had his accident.
Oh, then that was unbelievable. I never ever thought I would smile again after that happened.
Do you remember how you found out?
Yes, yeah. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was a knock on the door, and Phil was going to work the next day, so I thought, oh, Derek's forgotten his key, so I'd just go down to the door. And we had a very big window in our house. I suppose you must remember that. And as I looked out, there was a young policeman and a young policewoman on the doorstep. And, well, your heart sinks, you know, you just don't know how to handle it. And funny thing was, I don't know what was going through my brain, but when I opened the door and they told me, I said, "You've got a terrible job, haven't you, for telling people things like this?" I was feeling so sorry for those young police constables, you know. It was terrible. Anyway, they did say they hadn't got any details, but he was badly injured. And because I dashed into the car, and we picked up Robert's mum and dad, he was the driver, and it was a friend of Derek's. And we rushed up to the hospital, and I just flew the car door open and I flew in. I will always remember it. And I could see his friend's mum and his wife, he'd only been married 8 months. That was Nigel. And as I looked at her, she just looked at me and she said, "He's dead." And I thought, my legs went to jelly. I nearly collapsed. Anyway, I had to leave them, and we had to go and see the doctor, and they wrapped me in all this silver paper stuff that they put round you know. And we had to wait in this terrible, dingy little cubby hole to wait for the doctor to come before we could see him. And because they were working on Derek, putting, what do they call them on their head? They put weights on there. What do they call that?
A brace or a...
No, it's not a brace.
Traction.
Traction, that's it, traction. Yes, they were putting traction on. So the first time I saw him was when we went in the hospital then. And then, because the next day they had to transfer him up to Stanmore.
And how long was he recovering in the hospital?
He was in hospital for a year. And then I used to bring him home. Towards the end of that year, we used to bring him home at weekends because we had to have practice runs. But the only thing is, I didn't have any facilities for him, you know, no beds or anything. So we had to have him down in the front room. And you can always bet your life, as soon as you were seeing to anything for him, the doorbell would ring or something like that. So it was very, very hard at the time. But we managed to get his annex built for him, and he was quite comfortable in there. Yeah.
And how long did he live with you then?
9 years. 9 years he lived with me, and then dear Tina came along. Bless her.
And meanwhile, Grandad was still working, and
yes,
he retired. When did he retire? How old was he then?
I think he was in his 59, I think it was, when he retired. I know he took an early retirement because he'd done 40 years, you see, with the bank. And that's right, he joined when he was 17 and he retired after 40 years. So fortunately he did have a little bit of time. So.
And do you remember anything about Grandad's work? You know, anything he told you about it? What his
No,
actual
the
job
only thing is I know he was responsible for installing all the computers up at in London, and that was his job too. And because they used to take up the whole rooms then, didn't they? The computers and that. But no, he was responsible for all that. Yeah. And we used to go to some of their lovely do's and things like that, you know. Yeah. And
Grandad obviously then passed away a bit later on than that, and that must have been another incredibly difficult time.
Yes, yes. I think, you know, there was my mum to begin with, and then there was Derek, and then, of course, there was him as well. Yeah, he died when he was only 67. But we had a wonderful life, and we put our hands together, and thank God that we did have that time.
Yeah. And those sort of retirement years that you did have together, was there anything in particular that you remember from that? Any
well, we seemed to travel a bit more. My best years was between the age of 40 and 50 for myself, because the boys were off hand, and then we used to go out with our friends and that. We used to go away for weekends, like perhaps to Holland or sort of all those sort of places, Paris, everything. We used to go with our other friends, you know, and we really made up for some time there. That was wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
And how would you say, you know, your priorities have changed over time? You know, from thinking back to, you know, living in East London to where you are now, what would you say has changed in terms of your priorities?
Well, my life became a lot easier, and then when I stayed in our house for 15 years after Philip died, and I was managing all right because the maintenance was all right because I had a lot of stuff done to the house. But then I found the garden was getting a bit big for me, and I didn't want to let it go to rack and ruin because of my neighbours and things like that, you know. So eventually I did decide that, it was my 80th birthday that came up. And I thought to myself then, if I don't make up my own mind now what I'm going to do, I'll have that made up for me, which I didn't relish. No, I think they would have done me all right, but, you know, I just wanted to do my own thing. And then I got talking to friends who'd lived down here in St George's Park for 18 months, and they said, why don't you come down and have a look and see what you think? So that's what I did, and came down here, and I really do appreciate it, and I don't want to move anywhere else. I love it here.
And tell us about life here, you know, the sorts of things that you do and how you spend your time when you're here.
Well, I mean, every month we get a notice through the door to tell us all the different things that are on the menu, sort of thing. And we have concerts, and I play, I have a go at playing ping pong. And now I go swimming, because we've got our own swimming pool, and they're just lovely friends. You know, they're not real like my buddy friends like I've always had, but they're very lovely acquaintances, and they always include you, which is very nice. Yeah. I mean, if you want to be on your own, you can be on your own. And if you want to mix with anybody, there's always the cafe to go down and have a cup of coffee and talk to somebody. So no need to be on my own at all. Yeah.
And in parallel to all of that happening, obviously you had some fantastic grandchildren, and now you've got some great grandchildren.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
What would you say is different being a grandparent and a great grandparent from being a
I think
parent?
I love my great grandchildren. I do really, but I don't see them so often. And they're cute, and they look at me much as to say, well, I think she's one of us, sort of thing, you know. But my biggest joys were my grandchildren. And when you and Emily were born so close to one another, and we used to go out, I absolutely idolised that time. I loved it. And, you know, all those cute things that I could name a few things that you've done when you were little.
We won't go there.
No, but it was lovely, yeah. And you got so much closer to them. And most people have said that with their grandchildren. We love our great-grandchildren, we really do. But nothing takes the place of your grandchildren. And everybody said that. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
And you know, what would be your dream for your, you know, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren who will one day watch this video? What would your dream for them be, and the thing that you'd like them to take away from this?
Well, no, you're asking me, aren't you? I think it's as long as they're polite and respect older people and don't become selfish. That's the thing. Always think of somebody else. I hope that they always relish that sort of thing, you know. And I think just being very kind to people, that's all. And I mean, you don't have to always make sure that you can afford what you're buying. That's what I'd like to get over to them. Don't get yourself into debt. I mean, my dad, even though he didn't have very much, he would never buy anything until he saved up for it. So, you know, that is a really good pointer, I think.
Is there anything that you could tell me now that I might not know about you already?
Oh, I did go out with a chap once while Grandad was abroad. I did go out with a chap once, and I came off his motorbike.
And were you hurt?
Not very much. Not enough to sort of limp home to my mum and dad. I think I managed to keep that way from them.
I see. And then, you know, just to finish, you know, what is it that you would say gives you the greatest joy and makes you happiest in life?
Making people laugh. And the greatest kick that I ever used to get was when I could make Grandad laugh out loud. I think that's it, you know. If there's not laughter in the place, I don't want to know.